The fact that seems to me an enormously important fact in terms of the sharing of expertise, but also in terms of business to business activity, which is 50% of the economy. Okay, generally you had this absurdity beforehand in B2B, where there were two modes of interaction between two businesses. There was either a very distant mode, which was, you set up a big stall at a German trade fair, you send people emails, okay? Yeah. You communicate, you send them letters, you invite them on golfing days, okay? Either expensive or not very good stuff.
Yeah.
And then you had the face-to-face meeting, which was kind of high stakes, difficult to organize, expensive to do. Now, the important thing to me for B2B activity is that Zoom actually fills in the middle of the funnel.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, there wasn't really in B2B until Zoom came along. There was basically first date and there was marriage. Okay, and there was nothing in between.
Yeah.
There was no engagement, as you might call it, literally and metaphorically. There was no kind of, actually, I think we might commit here. Let's continue this conversation.
Yes.
And so, genuinely, I think in B2B, which is a large part of the economy, it never gets the same attention. I think that not only Zoom meetings, but webinars, live video, the fact that actually small entities can be major video players. Okay,
yeah.
I think that's a highly important fact. And there's a guy, Nick Bloom at Stanford, who's studying this in detail. Julia Hobsbawm,
Yes.
very brilliant woman, is also studying the new world of work. But the attention and the investment it's receiving in terms of studying how do you do this well, how do you do hybrid working well, how do you do it badly, what are the healthy findings in terms of increasing productivity, or where does it reduce productivity? We should be discussing these things for an hour a week.
Yeah.
And nobody is.
That is really interesting. One of the things you touch on there, costs and so on.
By the way, I said to the Department for Transport that for the price of about 7 miles of motorway, you could give everybody in the UK premium Zoom access.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, unfortunately, they're called the Department for Transport, not the Department for not moving people around very much. But it strikes me that the best thing that the Department for Transport could do is to remove unnecessary journeys from the rails and the roads.
Yeah.
But in Finland, you have a Department for Transport and Connectivity, which strikes me as a fundamentally intelligent thing to do, because you recognise the fact that electronic things are to some extent either complementary or substitutes for physical movement.
Yeah.
You can transmit things electronically, you can transmit things physically. And therefore, maybe you need Wi-Fi on trains rather than faster trains, to reprise one of my mantras, okay? But I don't think in the UK, I don't think there's that same joined-up thinking. I think we've just got a massive silo problem.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that's quite a good idea on that side of things. Why do you think, I ask about economic growth and whatever, but a lot of it comes down to sort of risk aversion. And you see that perhaps in marketing as well, that marketing...
Risk aversion is why you need marketing.
Yeah,
because
but
the status quo bias is so strong. I used to think that marketing was most effective when you needed the consumer to do it. You had a not very important distinction, and you needed the consumer to make a small behavioural change. So, in other words, I'll have cornflakes rather than grape nuts. Okay?
Yeah.
Move your hand a foot to the left. Advertising's pretty good at that. And it is.
Yeah.
Okay? And I used to think that if you had a really, really big idea, you didn't need marketing because it sold itself. Then I realised that when you have a really, really big idea requires a lot of behavioural change, which creates a lot of psychological friction. And so, perfect proof point of this, okay? The best idea anybody's ever had. I think, we can debate it, okay? But the best idea any single person's ever had is probably the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah.
It took them 50 years to get full acceptance, okay, from Jenner coming up with the idea. Massive psychological resistance, institutional resistance, religious opposition, okay. Really big ideas require a lot of marketing because they require a lot of people to change their minds.
Yeah.
And you can see where it works well. Same-sex marriage was a kind of triumph for fairly rapid, consensual change. handled absolutely brilliantly. You know, on the other hand, say drink driving norms. That was probably a 50-year. You know, my parents didn't drink drive, but their contemporaries did.